Thank you for those who are here in attendance. My name is Paul Meyer. I'm the editor of AcresUSA magazine, and today's panel and Q&A session is going to focus on just the stories of these three veteran organic certified farmers who will be sharing their insights on how to succeed in organic farming. This webinar is sponsored by USDA's new TOPP program, Transition to Organic Partnership Program, which we'll talk a little bit about hopefully later, which is a new initiative that's providing support to farmers to transition. Specifically, it's offering funding for both for mentors and for mentees who are looking to get into organic farming, up to $3,000 actually per mentor, and I think it's $500 per mentee. So it's a really interesting program. So our panel today consists of two growers. We were hoping for a third and have had some technical problems, I believe, but Emily Oakley and Michael Apple on the, well, at least on my right-hand side of the screen, are from Three Springs Farm in Oklahoma. They've been there farming since 2003. They have 3 acres under cultivation for vegetables and 3 acres in cover crops. Emily served as the farmer representative on the USDA National Organic Standards Board from 2016 to 2021. And then Chris Gosney is from John's Farm also in Oklahoma, which is a 130-year-old family farm. They raise certified organic beef as well as organic wheat and barley, and they will each share more of their story as we go here. Just the format of the webinar, I'm gonna ask questions to them for 20-25 minutes or so, but we will have time for Q&A from the attendees. So if you want to ask a question, please do so. You can type into the Q&A box there on Zoom and ask a question. We'll make sure that it gets to them. So please do that. And as I mentioned, this webinar is recorded. It'll be up on our YouTube channel, our AcresUSA YouTube channel, and you can find out more about us, our magazine, books, events, including our EcoAg conference in December 4 through 7. That's at AcresUSA.com. So let's go ahead and start some questions. I gave a very short bio, but could each of you, maybe starting with Chris, go ahead and give a little bit more context for your operation, size of operation, climate, what you're growing, and then specifically why you chose to go organic certified.
Well, like you have mentioned, we are in Northwest Oklahoma, and we originally started farming in about 1969 as a conventional farmer. But in 1995, we had opportunity to take on some rented property, all of about 400 acres of wheat production. And the only requirement was to keep it organic. And we turned that opportunity down a couple of times because we didn't know about organic. When we accepted it and got into it, that's when we really began to love the process. And basically, it redefined our operation. So within a few years, we transitioned everything under our umbrella to the organic program, starting out with field crops first, which was basically wheat. And over time decided that, hey, if we're going to have wheat and all our fields are going to be certified organic, we should do the same with our livestock. That was a little bit of a different process because we had raised only stocker steers. And so it took us about 10 years to transition from a stocker steer program into a cow-calf operation and become certified organic at the same time. So we have been practicing regenerative farming now since about 1996. We are certified organic. We are a grass finished verified producer as well in our cattle operation. And we wouldn't change and go back to conventional for anything, because organic's what we love to do.
And can you just, to continue just for 1 second, what we mentioned it a second ago, but what organization are you certified through?
We are currently certified through the Oklahoma Department of Ag. Originally, we were certified with OCIA, and then the Oklahoma Department of Ag came on board and offered certification. We love working with them. It's very easy to contact them. It's easy for them to come to the farm, and it's less expensive.
Do you know, do most states, or how many states do that? I'm not sure.
I could not answer that. Emily might be able to.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
enough. Definitely not enough. Just really a handful.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it's still worth checking out. It's mostly like Western states, where we're a little bit more spread out, but there are some in the whole country. It depends where you are. But if you go on the USDA's NOP website under certifiers, it will show you everybody that's accredited through the USDA NOP.
And then does that just become an additional task for the extension agents in every county? Or is it a separate people?
Yeah, it'll be staff people at the State Department of Agriculture. And there's usually a division within each State Department of Agriculture that is tasked with certifying organic. And so those folks are then in touch with USDA to make sure that they're accredited. They're the ones who go through the auditing process with the USDA. Extension agents have varying degrees of knowledge about organic systems. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, you guys, why don't you go ahead and give a little bit more context for your operation, please?
Sure. Yeah, we're a 2-person farm. This, as you said, we started in 2003. So this is just finishing our 20th year. We are certified organic also through the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture. We've been certified since we moved to our new property, which was 17 years ago. We leased land for 3 years closer to Tulsa. And at that land couldn't have been certified because it was in transition at that time. But fortunately, the property we moved to had no prohibited substances applied prior to us moving here. So we were able to get it certified right away. For us, I never think it was an option not to be organic. We deeply believe in organic farming. We love the challenges involved with it. I mean, sometimes it is difficult, but nothing that has been impossible to overcome. I think organic, we're always looking at like a whole system approach. We are looking at ways to kind of be more preventative than reactive on things. So we have a lot of wildlife habitat on our farm to attract beneficial insects, birds, and we've noticed over the years as that's increased, we've had a lot fewer insect issues with that habitat. We market our produce majority through a CSA. Our CSA operates a little bit differently. People pay up front like a traditional CSA, but they get to choose what they want. So we have an app where they choose what they want each week, and we make a weekly delivery into Tulsa. We're about an hour east of Tulsa, and people drive up and pick up their produce, and we love it. We used to do farmers market, and that was when COVID happened and the market shut down. We transitioned to this CSA model and have not looked back. We absolutely love this model. We also sell to a food bank in Tulsa that's gotten a grant to buy local food, and to a restaurant that really supports local farms. We grow.
Are you part of Fresh RX?
Yes.
Yes, we do sell to Fresh RX.
Yes.
We try to grow the majority of our fertility on farm. So we do a lot of cover cropping, both in the winter and summer, and we do a lot of rotation. We only import a little bit of nitrogen fertilizer and organic soybean meal, and that's only to supplement long-term crops. But this past year, we actually did not use it. And occasionally we do some liming. But other than that, the majority of our fertility is grown on the farm.
Cool. Yeah, anything to add, Emily? When you guys say that you're a 2-person farm, does that mean that you very intentionally don't hire other employees besides your daughter?
Yeah, we are admittedly anal, and we know that about ourselves. And so just the management side of things was not something that we thought we would enjoy. We love the community that comes with having employees, but if it's a rainy day, we don't want to have to hurry and wake up and find a job for that person to do. We want to be able to kind of go with the flow, do office work. Also, we just structured our size to have enough profit basically for the 2 of us. So in order to afford to hire employees, we would have to be at a different scale. So we do a lot with the tractor. We are not like one of the smaller scale farms that uses a lot of labor. We use our labor, but we use a lot of the tractor to, cultivate, transplant, cultivate in terms of like weeding the crops, and even to some extent, help with harvesting like potatoes, onions, etc., carrots, in terms of like a bed, like a lifter that helps us get the carrots and potatoes and onions out. So that is why we're a 2-person farm, and we really like it.
And I think we also just really love to have our hands, in the soil with the plants and not so much on the management of people side. So that's just I feel that the choice we made as our farm is that we really want to be involved in actual growing of food and very intimately in that instead of more of the management side of things.
That's great. And that's great to know that that is possible, because you hear a lot of people just complaining about and labor is such a problem for so many industries, not just farming, but yeah. Maybe Chris, can you talk about that just real quick? This isn't necessarily related to organic.
Absolutely.
What's your labor situation there? I mean, how many employees do you guys have?
We are actually, or have been, a 2-person farm as well. We will have an employee for a period of time, but they usually find something else they prefer to do, and it's back to the 2-person thing again. We've just recently experienced that. But our grandson just graduated from high school. His intent, since he's been 4 years old, was always to be a farmer. So he has moved into our community now, and we look forward to him being the next generation farmer, working with him, trying to show him and tell him why we're doing these crazy things we're doing now, as well as getting him initiated a little bit into the management side. But we have in the program, and everything we do is organic. There's around 5,000 acres total in our farm. So it is a huge responsibility for only 2 of us. We're thrilled to be able to add a 3rd. It is still a huge responsibility, but that's okay. That's just part of it. And we run about 100 head of mama cows. And for that reason, we need acres to put into production. We need a cash crop, which is wheat, in order to keep things rolling here financially. We need to raise our own alfalfa, and we do feed a very minimal amount of organic barley, and we need to raise that. Those commodities are just not out there, and if you bring them in from out of state, the cost is exorbitant, so you can't continue to do that. So in our restructuring our farm to become organic, it took us a good number of years to do that. We had to figure out how much alfalfa, for example, do we need, and where are we going to plant that, and how are we going to rotate that. So I totally understand when Emily says, we're and Mike are a 2-person farm. That's basically what we are here.
Are you still out on a tractor?
Am I?
Yeah.
I could be. I try to not volunteer too much anymore, I
Yeah.
used to do that all the time. In fact, when we were conventional farmers, we also had a custom harvest operation. And so John would leave for the summer and I would manage the farm along with, if I was fortunate, a high school kid that wanted to work during the summer. But I know that end of it as well. I have just tried to transition to something else. And when we went organic, we didn't realize at that point in time that we were going to need to develop a totally different market because we just relied on the conventional marketplaces. And so John needed to continue farming and being the one in the dirt all the time. And someone else, which I got nominated, needed to take on the other aspects of figuring out markets.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think it's important for, folks who are watching or listening or, just to know that both of you have long established systems. Like you figured out how to get enough profit with just 2 people on the farm. And that's a tricky thing to get to. Can you talk maybe just a little bit about your markets, Chris? Like where are you selling, you're selling your calves, your weaned calves, I assume, right?
We actually sell our beef directly to the consumer.
Okay. So you
Like,
got out of the out of the commodity market for beef completely too then, huh?
yes. Now wheat goes to organic mills all over the United States. We've sold some to California, North and South Dakota, Nebraska and Kansas and Texas, and over a couple of states on the East Coast. So we use various brokers. And when we first started, we didn't know who those people were either. But we were fortunate because the landlord who asked us to farm for him had a little bit of experience and said, you might contact this person or that person. So we started out with 2 when we probably have 8 to 10 now that are familiar with us as well as we're familiar with them. So it's over time worked from us having to make the contact and initiate everything to receiving calls and offers, which is very helpful, but it just takes time to get there.
I've heard recently of a couple larger scale growers selling specifically to directly to some packaged brands. Have you they supply all the grain for a certain energy bar or something. Have you had any experience with that, with selling to specific company buyers?
We have not. And that might be somewhat because of the limitation of our size. I can't imagine how many bushel of wheat you might have to sell to company XYZ to make those energy bars.
Yeah.
And we may not be large enough to do that. And that same theory relates back to our livestock operation with about 100 cattle that are ready to go to the processor a year. We don't really fit that model to supply someone who is processing organic beef that's coming in from various producers, and get out there that way. We just don't have that opportunity. We're not quite big enough.
Yeah.
We're big enough in work. So we're not looking to expand, but we had to point our market to meet the consumer and not a company.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I'll just encourage, attendees as well, if you have any other questions, to type those in, that'd be great. But getting back to you guys, Emily and Mike, can you just talk about specifically for organic certification, like what are some of the major challenges that you've experienced with certification? Any really good stories about something being totally great or totally messed up the day of the inspection, or just big challenges that people should be aware of?
I think, when you first apply and you're writing your organic system plan, I think that can be a little bit overwhelming because you're not necessarily sure what's going to happen. You're trying to project into the future, but they know that. Your inspector will know that. They give you a lot of grace for that. And it is a really helpful tool, even though it can be a little bit kind of overwhelming when you look at all the different components. It's almost like a business plan in some respects, because it helps you think through the steps that you're going to need to go through. They might change, but it'll at least get your brain kind of rolling on some of those points. And then once you've got your organic system plan, and once you've gone through your first year, it's pretty darn straightforward for the annual inspection. You've already got your paperwork set up. As long as you can just make yourself do it. I think the hardest part can be saying, oh, I'll get to that paperwork later, and then you can't remember what you did when. But if you can just a couple of times a week sit down at the computer and type that stuff in, it takes about, what would you say, like 2 or so hours, 2 to 3 hours to prepare our paperwork for our annual inspection. And then when they come out and inspect, it's really quick because we've already done like what they need, and they're good about letting us know what they need in advance. We have had at least one, so like unannounced inspection once, which is great. And I think our certifier came by last week when we weren't here. Because I was like, I'm sorry we're not there, but you're welcome to just go check everything out, obviously.
Mhm.
And I think just in terms of the bigger picture, the challenging part in organic, no matter what you grow, is weed control and fertility, because those are things that are a long-term process in an organic system. They don't happen overnight. So, Chris mentioned before we started Bermuda grass. If you've got a non-native but very hardy grass in your area, it doesn't matter what you grow unless you're growing Bermuda, it's going to be a challenge. So I think figuring out some of those systems and talking with other growers in your area will help you get a sense of how they're dealing with fertility, how they're dealing with weed control. But we have had 2 years during really hot drought years in 2011 and 2012 when we had a blister beetle outbreak. And it was the first time I really understood why people might love pesticides, because I was like, could it just rain Pyganic on the fields? That would just be great. And there wasn't a lot of information about blister beetles. They're not, a super common pest, but we eventually worked it out, figured it out, and they're cyclical. So I'm just gonna knock on wood that never happens again. But that after 2012, that was a year when we said to ourselves, oh my gosh, how many more of these can we take? They send out an aggregating pheromone, and since it was dry and everything around us was brown, our farm was the only green thing, and so they were just coming from miles around every night. It's good.
Wow.
I think on a different topic, but in terms of organic, I think one thing people get a little bit hung up on sometimes is the seed. And even for us at the beginning, it was a little bit harder to pay that extra bit for organic seed. But now we're big believers in that, really trying to grow the organic seed movement. It's not just about your seed purchases. You're really doing a lot to help grow the organic seed industry. But I think I've heard a lot of growers have, kind of gripe about that one. Why do we need to do that? It's not like a pesticide, or it's nothing that we're adding to the soil. But even with cover crop seed, getting organic seed is really growing that industry. And over time, now we're seeing a lot more varieties become available. And I also think those seeds are more primed for organic system. So it's a win-win down the road. I mean, it hurts a little bit when you're paying for it. But if you're thinking long-term in the big picture, it's well worth it.
Chris, any major challenges you'd like to discuss?
Emily alluded to the record keeping, and I think after I figured out that we can do this, we keep better records now than we ever did prior to being certified organic. That's been a good thing for us. And as she said, once you get it into your system on what it is you need to do, but I am quite certain that the vegetable farmers, they have much more record keeping than we do. John carries a notebook in his pocket, and so when calves are born, he just writes that down. And when we plant wheat, he writes that down. So we really don't go to the computer, to the database on a weekly basis, maybe monthly if we think we need to. But we have the records with us. And overall, when we do the annual inspection and that report, that's very beneficial to us to look where we've been and then make a plan for where we're going. We also talked about, the fertility and health of the soil. And as a result of going organic, we have learned how vitally important the organic matter is in the soil. And healthy soil, we don't have the weeds that our neighbors have. And that was very evident for us this year, coming out of the drought just prior to harvest. And it rains on that land, and weeds just went nuts, except in our fields. And the only field that we had weeds in is one that's in transition. And our neighbors were saying, this is the worst harvest ever. We're just tearing up our combines with these huge weeds that are trying to go through there. And we didn't have that problem. We drove slow in our fields because of the dampness and because crabgrass likes the rain as well. And that doesn't slide through the combine sickle very well. So we had to slow down, but we didn't tear up anything. And it all has to do with the healthy soil. You can watch it. You not only know it is there, but in some instances like this year, we could actually observe it. Very rewarding.
Have you guys, were you gonna say something too, Emily?
I was hoping to ask Chris a question.
Please.
Speaking of transitioning, I mean, when you relay a story like that, I wonder, what do your neighbors think? And do you ever win over converts? Because it feels like you guys are still kind of out there on your own. And if you aren't winning converts, what do you think some of the barriers might be for people
to transition over, to change? If you kind of research why people change, it's generally because something forces them to change. It's not because we're just out there loving to change and thinking we can't wait to change, because we're comfortable where we are. And we were comfortable where we were, with the exception that John was getting very bored with conventional farming. And all he, like our grandson is saying now, all he ever wanted to do was farm. And he couldn't think that he would do anything else, but he was truly bored with it because it was the same thing year after year. We also had a tragic situation come up in our family. And so as a result of boredom and a tragic situation, when an opportunity to change came along, we turned it down because we didn't think we could do it. But the gentleman who was making that offer was persistent. So we put a pencil to it, which today we regret that was our motivation, but we did put a pencil to it and say, okay, if we took on this little bit of acreage here, we'd have maybe a little bit less commercial input cost, and maybe our product would bring $1 more at the market. So maybe that's what we should do, because some of our neighbors have already gone broke and we're not far from it. That was our motivation at the time. But after seeing what healthy soil does and changing the paradigm of our thinking, we're so glad we had that offer to begin with. And then we just kept the ball rolling until we got to where we are today. And yes, we are the lone strangers out here. I would tell anybody who's thinking of transitioning, just kind of set your mind to the fact that people think you're crazy. I mean, why would you do that? And that's okay. It took us a few years to accept that thought, and the fact that people were driving by, looking at what in the world are those crazy people doing now. They're sitting out there watching bugs crawl up the leaf of their plants, and what's up with them. That's okay. We've adjusted and adapted to that. But one of our neighbors, well, in fact, the majority of them use considerable amount of chemical. And one of them said to John not long ago, "I watch you, and it's sure interesting to me you don't have weeds." And I went to a conference, he said, and I told people my neighbor doesn't have weeds, but he's organic, and they don't believe me because they think you should have a lot. Well, when you transition, you have a lot. But once you get there and you start building that health in your soil, you don't have so many. Same way with insects. We learned over time that insects would go to neighboring fields and they would start applying chemical before we could find those insects in our field. But after, weeks, several weeks, 2-3 weeks of insect pressure, then we would see some. And often we would not have to do any type of organic application to those because their life cycle was expiring. And sometimes we've had to. And like you, we've had to figure out what in the world are we going to do? How are we going to handle this in an organic measure? But there's ways. If nothing else, there's sugar butter.
Yeah, it's challenging, right? I don't think humanity has ever really thrived on, long-term thinking instead of short-term, but probably essential, especially not these days. Emily, Mike, you guys want to answer your own question? How many converts do you have?
We're just not we're in a very predominantly cow-calf operation area. I think people are interested that we're making a living doing this. I think there's that aspect, but there's not too many people that are really eager to grow vegetables in this part of the state. The soil just isn't very conducive to that. So I'm not sure if we've really,
I think some of our neighbors who do cattle have gotten interested in the potential for organic, especially because, a lot of folks who are doing cow-calf in areas like northeastern Oklahoma are not using inherently a lot of prohibited materials. And so for them, it's more of like a marketing challenge to get an avenue for their product. That's more than maybe like just the transition of a conventional system to an organic system. But yeah, when we came here 20 years ago, and I'm from Oklahoma, so that's how I convinced Mike to come. I thought there's no way after 20 years it would still be not as amply full of organic vegetable farmers, but there are a lot of reasons for that. But yeah, it has been a bit challenging. I think where smaller scale organic vegetable farmer folk tend to go is places where there's already more of an established community of growers where they could share equipment. And just that whole community aspect and the mentoring aspect that you talked about with the TOPP program. I think, just climatically it's challenging, soil is challenging, it might be challenging politically for some people. But the opportunity is amazing. And, it's maybe the fact that we haven't had a ton of other competition has helped our business. I'm not so sure. I believe that having a lot of organic growers actually just grows the organic consumer base.
Yeah.
I don't think that, you're stifled, but we have had a very, I feel for us on a small scale, successful go so far.
We do have one question here that I'll get to in just a second, but real quick first, are you all aware of this new TOPP program, and are you planning to participate, or what's your thoughts on that?
I had not heard of it.
Okay. Emily, you guys are aware
I've heard
of
of
it?
it. Yeah, we'd had some folks reach out to us, but ironically, it was like a CSA member whose brother had a friend who was like putting on one of these conferences, who first, kind of tipped us off that it was going on.
Yeah.
I do not
Well,
know much.
Yeah. Well, what I know about it is, and you can just Google top USDA, but it's a new program that basically is, it's got a lot of other, sub programs, but the main one that's interesting to you guys and to new folks who are thinking about transitioning is that it's offering actual payment to the people who are transitioning and to mentees. So, long-standing organic farmers like you guys, and the payment is not bad. It's about $3,000 a year per person, and you can have multiple mentees. And then it's there's a requirement number of times you have to get together and those kinds of things, but it pays the mentor, and it pays the mentee even $500 to get to you're getting paid to receive mentorship, which seems like a win-win. So the question that we got is I'll summarize, basically talking about, the bottom line is hardcore no-till advocates, you basically they're using herbicides, and probably maybe even more herbicide than are used in other conventional systems. But the question is, what's your view of an approach to tillage? And then also, do you use some type of organic herbicide? And I'd particularly be interested in that from you guys on the vegetable side. I mean, you talked about you're using tillage. I assume mostly light tillage, surface level, but then have you experimented with some of the available organic herbicides?
Very, very limited, only in some perennial crops. And so not a whole lot. Can't really speak to that really very well. In terms of like cover cropping is really our main weed control method. Constantly really having the soil covered with with cover crops, green manures, tends to be our best avenue for controlling weeds. In terms of tillage, we're actually pretty firm believers in the benefits of tillage. I know that's not the most politically correct thing to say these days, but we feel, we've looked into how to limit tillage, and we've done some things. We've got some equipment that just kind of scrapes the surface to kind of in between plantings when we don't have a cover crop ready to go in, and we need to keep some weeds under control. We can do something called skim cultivating, so we're not just pulverizing the soil over and over again. But I think tillage does have a place if it's not overused, if it's used strategically. I think you're getting carbon deeper into the soil, especially with our cover crops. We just grow a lot of biomass, and so we've got to get it into the soil. So I don't necessarily think it's an either or situation. I think there's ways of doing it that are not destructive and that can actually be beneficial. And so I think if people don't have to, have these labels, no-till or whatever, I think it can be, there's a place for it. And I think it also depends on your soil and your system and all of that. I don't think, it has to be good for everybody kind of thing. You all have to know what your system is like in your soil.
Just to give people an example, can you go through maybe one crop real quick? Like, let's say you harvest a bed of carrots in, late spring. What cover crop are you planting? When are you planting the cover crop? You're seeding directly after you harvest, I assume. You're not seeding into an existing crop of carrots.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so we plant things kind of in blocks. So all our cool weather crops are planted together. So in Oklahoma, we really do have those distinct cool seasons and warm seasons. So when our cool season crops are done, usually that's the beginning of July, we will go ahead and do a rototill. So it'll get one rototill per bed. And if something was finished earlier, like radishes or something, then we'll use that skim cultivator later on, right before planting the cover crop, because we don't do any double cropping on vegetables. So when all that cool weather season stuff is tilled in, then we'll go ahead and plant a warm season cover crop, and that's sorghum, Sudan grass, sun hemp, soybeans, cowpeas, safflower, sunflower. So we try to grow a multi-species cover crop. And so that is usually in the ground until early September, and then that starts tillering. So we'll terminate that with, depending on the size, we've had our flail mower just can't handle it, so we'll brush hog it for the first cutting, and then flail mower it a little further down, and then again rototill that, or do a quick disc on it just to break it up, and then rototill it, and then that will go right into a winter cover crop. So that's what we've just finished planting now, is our winter cover crop, and that's oats, tillage radish, some clover, some mustard, and the main one that we really like is vetch. So most of the other stuff will winter kill here later on in the winter, December, January, depending on temperatures, but the vetch will live. And the vetch really just takes over March, April. It will just put on tremendous amounts of biomass and provide a lot of nitrogen for us. So that vetch will stay in the ground until we need the ground. So we'll just only mow and till in vetch as needed. So we're not tilling in that whole thing. So that way it keeps soil covered for a lot longer.
Yep. That's great. It's nice in your system. It sounds like where you are, you've got plenty of land. You're not trying to do everything on half an acre or something. So you can afford to plant a cover crop and you don't have to double crop, which I think probably makes your system a lot simpler. Mm-hmm. Chris, can you talk for just a second about that? Do you have any experience on your wheat, maybe with organic herbicides, or you mainly just using some tillage?
Not so much on herbicides. With the tillage, we have often thought, maybe if there was a way to do organic no-till, would that be beneficial to us? And we have never figured out how to do no-till in the organic realm. But we do minimal tillage. However, with our cultivated wheat crop, our harvest is usually completed around mid-June, and then we need to start planting again mid-September in order to have wheat pasture. So we don't have a very long time frame in there. We would love it if we could plant a cover crop right after harvest, get that turned under and be ready to plant wheat. That is so weather dependent. Occasionally that happens, but a lot of times it doesn't. It's too dry, can't get it up, whatever. We have done some cover crop and we feel like it's beneficial when we can, but we can't always do that. We do try to plant on some layout ground a winter cover crop, and that's very helpful. And we have enough acreage in cultivation now that we are on a 3-year rotation. So we'll plant 2 years and harvest that wheat, and then the 3rd year lay it out. And we are noticing increase in production on those fields. We get a better yield in 2 years, lay it out, and then go back into it again. With our pastures, we are able to do some rotation on there. And again, we have a lot of small acreages of pasture. So instead of putting up a temporary fence and moving it every day, like true rotational may be described, we will pasture a small area, 50 acres of grass for a short period of time, see what species of grass they're liking. And when that's gone, we'll move them to a field or pasture that hasn't been pastured in several months. And so we rotate that way. It's not probably the true definition of rotation, but it's working very well.
Okay. Well, we're kind of running out of time here. It's been a great conversation. Do all of you just have some final thoughts here?
Paul, before you do that, we have a person that had their hand up that wanted to ask a question. Do we have time to do that real quick?
Yeah, I think just for, yeah, real quick question. Go ahead. Can you unmute?
Yeah. Uh, Hi, Adrian. Are you able to?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, I had some questions about marketing. We're doing beef cows, but also are in the process of getting a greenhouse certified organic, and are already using organic practices. But I don't know if anybody has experience with marketing organic meat slash beef and or the organic vegetables, because I live in an area where there's not a ton of people that are super into organic. There's not a huge demand for it. Like at the farmers market, I don't think anybody's certified organic. So that's what I was wondering, if how to, what should I do for marketing? What are the techniques or the things to do?
Any thoughts, tips?
Chris?
Well, I wish that there was a surefire way to get to the market. We started with a couple of farmers markets, and I think the best thing that we did there was start an email database. And I watched other producers, and I never saw them do that. Maybe I just missed it, but I didn't catch it if they were. And that was the beginning of our basis for marketing and staying in touch with people, letting them know what we do and how we do it and why we're doing it, and kind of helping them learn who we are, because they didn't know us and we didn't know them. We were extremely fortunate that we had decided that we needed to develop a website and make online ordering possible within the state of Oklahoma. And as a result of that, develop some delivery routes. And that came out in December, just prior to the COVID pandemic. If we had not done that, I'm not sure we would be where we are today. So like Emily and Mike, we are not going to farmers markets now. We're just totally relying on a delivery route. And I understand what this gentleman is saying. No one in our direct area understands organic or necessarily looking for it either. People in the metropolitan areas, I think, are a little more aware of the health benefits that we offer through organic. So we had to go to them and start reaching out to them to develop a market.
I don't think Adrian was
Okay.
here at the very beginning. Emily, Mike, maybe just describe your system of your CSA.
Oh yeah, we do like a people pay up front, but then we have an app where people can choose what they want in quantity, how much they want of each thing on a weekly basis, which changes. But we do sell to Tulsa, which is about an hour away. I would say that there might be more interest than people realize, and there's just an education piece there that of trying to for people to really understand the difference, and it will take time, but we don't sell a ton locally, but there are people around here that do care. And they're, even in Tulsa, when we started 20 years ago, there maybe wasn't as many people caring, and now there are. So it's something that is growing as people become more aware of what's in their food. And so, yeah, I'm not sure like where you are specifically or like what your options
Kentucky.
are. Kentucky.
I
Yeah.
was going to say that, we were the only certified organic produce vendors when we were at the farmers market for the 17 years that we were there.
Oh.
Of those 14, we were certified. And, we got a big old USDA seal certified organic banner made and put that up. And it made a difference. I mean, it was just a really easy way for people to immediately see, oh, these guys are certified. And because our market really did enforce at that time, no other vendor could say that they were like beyond organic or, kind of undermine us, because we were like, well, why should we bother being certified if, these other vendors are allowed, to kind of skirt the term. And that really helped. I mean, we had a very loyal following that followed us during COVID to our current system. And it can be surprising how many people really do care about organic when they know that that's what you are.
What's the
You
app that
said
you guys use?
you said you had an app. Where do you find an app? How do you what
Yeah,
Yeah, a
we-
friend built it.
it's still in like production. It's just like a custom thing that we're working on just on our farm, but we're hoping to get it to a place where we can release it to other folks. It just
I'd be-
something that came about in COVID, and that we've been
It's
getting
all
work.
open source, and the idea was to make it either free or as close to free as possible to other producers. It's just not prime time ready yet, and so we're still working
on
out the kinks.
Yeah.
That's what happens
Well-
when you're working on a tight budget.
Yeah. Well, whenever that happens, I don't know if there's a way to get the contact information for you guys, but I would be interested in that app.
Sure. Yeah, we're just Three Springs Farm. So if you look us up, our email's farmers@threespringsfarm.com. So
If it gets to the prime time level, we will do like an article and acres and growing for market and let people know that where they can download it.
Cool.
Great. Thank you, Adrian, for that. And yeah, I mean, maybe just real quick, where can people find you? You said Google just Three Springs Farm, Oklahoma for you guys, and
Yeah.
Chris, John's Farm in Oklahoma.
John'sFarm.com. It's easy.
Yep, you can Google it and find it. So great. Well, thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate your time. This has been a really insightful conversation, I think. Again, if anyone is interested, please look us up, AcresUSA.com, our magazine and books, and then the conference we have coming up in December. And we have more of these webinars coming up, will be coming up in the future. So please check that out. So thanks again.
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Thank you, guys.